training on net set preparation, followed by 2 creative writing workshops. All the 4 webinars will be conducted by experienced and expert teachers and professionals. I am sure it will not only be useful, but also enjoyable. Before we start with today's session, I request our principal, Dr. R.J. Barnabas, to give his message to the participants.
Hello friends, let me begin by saying that I hope you are all safe and taking care of your health during this very trying time that the COVID-19 pandemic has thrown up towards all of us. I think let me set up this online series of lectures that we have planned by saying that it is time that we all stop overthinking about the pros and the cons of the pandemic and get ourselves into a low mood. Instead, I think it is time that we use this problem as an opportunity in best making use of the time that we've all got to us. And using this basic idea in mind, I had requested all our departments to come up with training sessions for our student community so as to ignite their minds and also to enhance their skills in their chosen subject. And let me tell you that I am very happy that the Department of English has taken up this challenge and has organized this series of online sessions for our Department of English students. These will help in enriching the students and also in enhancing their skills. I'm particularly pleased and I'm grateful and also very thankful to the 4 excellent speakers who have agreed to be a part of these training online sessions over the next 4 days. I thank them on behalf of the management and Ahmednagar College for accepting our offer, and I'm sure that our students will find your sessions extremely useful in the coming 4 days. A small little piece of advice to our students: I think that it is time that you look at this time that you have got in your homes to best equip yourself with all the tools necessary to make yourself more confident about the subject and help you to get back into a positive strain of mind. I'm sure this 2 days and the coming 3 days will be very useful to you in strengthening your basics and making you more confident about your subject and its approach. Thank you again to all our speakers who have accepted to be a part of this online sessions. And again, a warm welcome to all of you. Have a very fruitful 4 days and God bless you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Principal Dr. R.J. Barnabas. Now we will turn to our session for today. Let me briefly introduce today's speaker, Dr. Shardool Thakur. Shardool Thakur is an associate professor in the Department of English at Fergusson College, Pune. He has a doctorate from the English and Foreign Languages University, IFLU, Hyderabad, on the topic Identity, Radicalization and Reform in Islam, an analysis of select personal contemporary narratives. Apart from teaching literature, Dr. Thakur's areas of interest are literary criticism, political theory, current affairs, current affairs and international relations, interdisciplinary studies, Indian writing in English and translation, Dalit writing, translation studies, English language teaching, and the use of technology in teaching. He does career counseling for students on an informal basis. And that is precisely why we have requested him to extend the benefit of his expertise in this field with all our students. And I once again welcome Dr. Shardool Thakur to this webinar series organized by the Department of English of Ahmednagar College. And I request him to take over and start his presentation. Just before that, I request all participants, please listen carefully, all participants throughout this webinar, keep your audio off, click off. For example, flip Kanta, put your audio off and don't ever click on that present option. If you click on the present option, everything else will stop. For example, now Kalyani Kolapkar is presenting. Stop clicking that present option. Let us go to Dr. Shardool Thakur's presentation now. Thank you very much. Once again, I welcome everyone and our speaker, Dr. Thakur. Shardool, please.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. And thank you, Professor Kamalakar Bhatt and Ahmednagar College for giving me a chance to interact with you all. I hope I'm audible to everybody. Okay. And just give me a minute. I'll share my screen. Is the screen visible to everybody? Okay. Yeah. So let me begin with talking about the logic behind a presentation like this, right? Career prospects for English graduates. Now, typically what happens is when we ask students about their future career plans, right? Students who are doing their BA in English, or even those who are doing their post-graduation in English. So one of the most common answers that comes up is that I will take up teaching, right? And okay, the screen is not visible. Give me a second. Yeah, is my screen visible to everybody?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and am I audible clearly?
You are audible, sir, now.
Okay, fine. Yeah, so I'm extremely sorry for the glitch. So we were talking about why is it necessary to have a webinar or a maybe a discussion on a topic like this, right? So the typical answers that English graduates give us is that they will take up teaching as one of their options, or maybe journalism, right? Even in the place that I teach in Fergusson College and many other colleges where I interact with students, I realize that a lot of students are not really familiar with all the different career options that have emerged in the last couple of years, right? And maybe a few years ago, if someone would have said that you're studying arts, this would have invited a lot of disapproving looks. But that is not really the picture now. I would say that as a result of the IT boom, right, a lot of new opportunities have come up. So the logic is, or the rationale of a presentation like this is to make students aware of the various career options that are available to them. They shouldn't lose out on these options only because of ignorance. That is the aim of this presentation, right? So we start with the traditional career options that are typically available to English graduates, right? Like I mentioned, teaching, either at the primary school level, which requires a diploma in education, and for the secondary and the higher secondary level, you require a BA. Right? This is a full-scale 2-year program after graduation. And for the junior college level, you require a master's as well as a BA. And for the senior college level, you require not just a master's, B+, plus either a NET or a SET. Right? And in the recent times, at least for the university departments, a PhD has been made mandatory. Right? And as you are aware, in the second session tomorrow, Dr. Madhuri Gokhale will be talking about how to prepare for NET and SET. Right? So basically, these are the teaching options in schools and colleges. Apart from this, a lot of our students do take up language coaching or language training kind of posts in institutes like Symbiosis, LTIS, right? This is one very well-known institute for language training. And after having worked there for a couple of years, then many of our students go on to set up what is generally known as a Spoken English Institute. Right? And these institutes, you see them almost everywhere, right? Catering to the demand of a lot of students who wish to improve their communication skills. Yeah, so apart from the teaching options, now let me point out one thing, that since these are the traditional options which are generally fairly well known, right? I will just be kind of glossing over them and kind of talking about them very briefly. So the next career option that we talk about is the corporate world. The HR department is a favorite for a lot of students. After their graduation, they appear for CAT or similar examinations, and they do an MBA and join companies as trainee managers. And the next option is journalism and mass media. Here we make a distinction between print media, where you could start either as a journalist who has to go out on the field and gather news, or you could even start as a proofreader or a trainee sub-editor, and gradually, as you become more and more experienced, you become a column writer or a senior editor. And for a job in the journalism field, typically you'd require a diploma or a certificate course in journalism, or even a bachelor's level program in mass media. Then apart from the print media option, you have electronic media, where if your presentation skills are good, your command of the language is good, you could work as a news presenter or as an anchor for news channels. Those who have a keen interest in music could also take up a position as a radio jockey in any of the FM channels, right? And or the third option is that of web portals. Nowadays, a lot of news is disseminated through web portals like The Wire, Scroll, and many other portals that are available. So these portals also require journalists. Yeah, so like I said, in all of these options, one has to keep one thing in mind. I mean, the total number of graduates being churned out every year, even the regular graduates, plus the people who go on to do their BA. Do we have enough number of teaching positions which would cater to almost all the students who pass out and who intend to take up a teaching job? The answer very clearly is no. Right? And that's why I think it is very necessary that we talk about these new age career options. So a logical question that would come up is, what is so new about these career options? So I would say that post 1991, right, there was a paradigm shift in the market scenario in India. Right? You must be aware that in 1991, India shifted from a closed economy, a socialist kind of a model, to a free market economy, which is also referred to as the as globalization. Right? So the market opens up, and the world kind of becomes a smaller place, more interconnected in nature. Now, as a result of this change, right? So I would say that the convergence of globalization, better IT infrastructure, and better application of existing technologies to newer areas, this is what is making these new areas available. Right? So if you go back to 1991, when India became integrated with the global economy to a greater extent than before, a lot of companies, multinational companies like Texas Instruments, IBM, Accenture, they realized that it made economic sense to outsource many of their activities to countries like India, China, and Brazil, where the same activity could be done in, say, 1/3 of what it would take in the US. And even though the boom began with software, it is rapidly spreading to newer domains like e-learning, knowledge process outsourcing, KPO, business process outsourcing, legal process outsourcing, medical transcription, advertising. Now, this is where India, with its huge pool of English-speaking skilled personnel, has a distinct advantage over countries like China. And you must be aware that countries like Bangalore, Hyderabad, Pune, Mumbai, Delhi are rapidly becoming new hubs of the knowledge-based economy. And it is in this context that India has the potential of becoming a global knowledge powerhouse. Right? So this is what we mean by these new career options. Now, the next question that you would ask is, what is there in it for me? Right? A student studying English would naturally ask. The answer is very, very simple. There's a world of opportunity which is waiting to be explored. Right? All that you need is reasonably good proficiency in written and spoken English, basic computer literacy skills like familiarity with MS Word, Internet, good analytical skills, clarity in thinking, visualizing ideas. Anybody who fulfills the above criteria stands a good chance of getting employed in any of these sunshine careers. And for the teachers who might also be listening to this webinar, it follows that if we are aware of these career options ourselves, we would be able to guide our students in a better way. Yeah, so this chart should kind of make the idea clear. I've divided the new age career options into 4 major areas. The first is BPOs, or what are generally known as call centers. LPOs, KPOs are on the same lines. Medical transcription is also related to outsourcing. Then the second option is related to language training or soft skill trainers, and also accent training. The third option is copywriting, basically in the field of advertising, and digital marketing is another new area. And the last one is IT and IT-enabled services. This is a broad term that we use for most of these IT-enabled services. In a sense, you could also argue that all of these 4 different areas that I've talked about, or at least 3, excluding copywriting and digital marketing, are in a sense related to IT. So that's why IT-enabled services. Now, BPOs or call centers, like I said, outsourcing, right? Getting your work done from or outsourcing your work to other companies. A lot of companies in the US, UK, and Europe have realized that instead of paying high salaries to their employees in their countries, it is easier to kind of get the job done in India or similar countries, right? Philippines is another emerging country. So you have a lot of business process outsourcing centers or known as call centers. So typically graduates are employed as customer support executives, right? And their job is to handle the queries of or complaints of overseas customers. So let me also mention that apart from the overseas market, there's a huge market catering to the Indian companies as well, right? But as far as foreign companies are concerned, right? So in order to take up a job like this, you require a high level of alertness and ability to handle customers with tact and patience, right? Very often you must have seen that when you go to a showroom or some service center, customers are very angry, very upset about lack of service or whatever, and the customer service representative has to handle the customers without losing his or her cool, right? So that quality is something which is very essential. Beginning with the position of a CSE, customer support executive, if you're good enough, you can go on to become a team lead, and then a manager and a senior manager. Now, this is a format that I'll be following for all the career options. I'll be telling you about the pros and the cons very briefly, right? Because the student should be in a better position to judge for themselves, right? So the advantages are very clear, that a lot of students start joining call centers, or they join call centers even as they are doing their graduation. So that gives you a chance to start earning relatively soon. Now, a lot of companies are offering them these customer support executives in order to ensure that they continue with their company. They're giving them a chance to study further. They have a lot of tie-ups with management institutes, so you can enroll for a postgraduate program in management. Apart from this, in order to retain their employees, they offer them perks like coupons for various popular kind of outlets, Domino's, McDonald's, as well as to malls, as well as discotheques. The idea is that since it's a young kind of a crowd, they should be offered some incentives which would ensure that the employees continue working there. And the reason for that is not really very difficult to find. In the disadvantages, the graveyard shift, right? Because these companies cater to the overseas market, primarily the US and the UK. There's a time lag, right? So when it is daytime in say America, at that time it would be maybe sometime in the middle of the night in India. So that kind of makes it slightly difficult, and that's why it's referred to as the graveyard shift. And this also leads to a lot of attrition. And remember that this is a job where you have to keep performing consistently. You have to multitask. You should be able to kind of receive calls, and even as you're receiving calls, you're supposed to type out your reports, and then once this is over, move on to the next complaint. Right? Of course, you do have breaks, but within that small time frame, right, there's a lot that you have to do. And this can be, at times, this can be very demanding and could lead to burnout. So this is about BPOs. KPOs and LPOs are also somewhat similar. LPO is basically legal process outsourcing, right? Even though they do hire general graduates, what is preferred is a background in law, right? But the same principle operates, getting their work done by Indian customer support executives at a much lesser price. Yeah. So then we move on to the next option, medical transcription. You must be aware that in the US, doctors are required to maintain elaborate databases of the patient's medical history. So what they do is they just record their observations. They are so busy that they do not have the time to note down each and everything. So they just record their observations, and at the end of the day, the company sends this data to a call center in India, where medical transcriptionists listen to the data, transcribe it, and store it in the typewritten form. Then you have senior editors who put the data in the prescribed format, and the data is sent to the US, where it is at the doctor's table when she comes to the clinic in the morning. Now, it might seem to be a very simple task, but this requires very good listening skills, excellent grammar, and a very high level of accuracy, 99% plus, given the critical nature of the job. It's very obvious that one wrongly heard or typed diagnosis will not only ensure that you're fired, but it will also put the hospital and, more importantly, the patients in serious trouble. So here I would say that one additional advantage of medical transcription is that a lot of people work in companies for a couple of years, and after that they take up the job part-time or even freelance. Okay? So this is one particular advantage. But I would say that in terms of the complexity that is involved in the job, right? In terms of the input and the output kind of ratio, it does not really pay as well as maybe some of the other jobs that I would be talking about. Right? So you typically begin with a salary of around 20 to 30K, and if you're really good, in say around 3 to 4 years, you could rise to the position of an editor, where you could earn say around 60 or 70,000. I'll just yeah. Now, given the fact that you have a lot of graduates being employed in various companies as customer support executives, right? There's also a huge demand in various companies for language trainers. So language trainers are required to train their staff in soft skills. They would work on identifying the problem areas in their communication skills. And as we know, language skills mean L, S, R, W. All of them are extremely important. Yeah. And the job of a corporate trainer or a language trainer, also known as a soft skills trainer, is to help improve the communication skills of the customer support executives. And apart from language trainers, right, you also have accent trainers. Since, like I mentioned, the BPO industry caters to the overseas market, the American and the British market. One major problem that a lot of customers in the US and US particularly complain is that of intelligibility. Right? The Indian accent becomes a slight problem, and they find it difficult to make sense of what is being said. Remember that comprehension and intelligibility is something which is absolutely essential if you're interacting with a customer in order to solve the problem of the customer. So this is where the job of an accent trainer comes into picture. Right? They work on accent neutralization, right? Identifying the areas where there's a potential problem. They provide exposure to the American accent through a lot of videos, operas, Hollywood movies, right? And help you, and of course software programs also. So it goes without saying that for both of these options, corporate trainers as well as soft skill trainers, it is necessary that you should be highly proficient in English, and you should have an eye for linguistic detail or a ear for the phonetic nuances. These jobs are highly paid jobs, and in a couple of years, if you're really good, right, you can very easily earn up to say 2 to 3 lakh rupees per month. But it is not everybody's cup of tea. Right? Only those who are really good and are interested in kind of improving their language skills to such an extent that they can train others. But having said that, I think corporate trainers are this is one area which has huge career opportunities, because almost every company hires corporate trainers in order to train their employees. In fact, if you have read this novel called One Night at a Call Center by Chetan Bhagat, that gives you an insight into the life of call center employees. Okay, now I'll move on to another area where English graduates stand a very good chance, and that is copywriting in the field of advertising. So copywriting is a very challenging kind of a field. Language proficiency, of course, is required, but equally important, or I would say that what more important is the ability to play around with words and ideas. Copywriters basically design the ads that we see, the jingles that we hum. So in order to be a successful copywriter, one needs to have loads of creativity and the ability to visualize and come up with ideas that will work with customers. Indian copywriters have become so successful that over the last couple of years, they've been sweeping most of the Golden Lion Awards at the Cannes, and they are in huge demand worldwide. In fact, a lot of companies are shifting their copywriting division, worldwide copywriting divisions to India. Right? So Prahlad Kakkar, Prasoon Joshi, and many other people who are fairly well known. So these are the creative kind of visualizers behind most of the ads that you see. So copywriters need to have this analytical ability, right? Analysis of what is it that is required, and they should be able to use their creativity, think in an innovative manner, the ability to think out of the box. Right? The same old ads become very boring, so you need to have something which is attention grabbing and which really clicks. Remember that for ads, right? Product recall. Very often people buy a product if they remember the ad and the person giving the ad. Right? So that is how copywriting is extremely important. And if you're really good, you can go up to say around 2 to 3 lakhs in say 4 to 5 years. Apart from copywriting, remember that copywriting is a very niche kind of area as compared to BPOs and language trainers. Companies typically hire employees for BPOs and for the corporate training options in a large number, but copywriting options are relatively limited in number. Then we move on to digital marketing. This is an upcoming kind of area in the last 4 to 5 years. So most of the skills that you see here overlap with copywriting or advertising. One additional skill that would be required. So digital marketing is basically marketing that uses the internet, right? And many of online digital technologies. Right? So you need to have a keen understanding of social media platforms like WhatsApp, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. right? And you pick up any form of content, whichever you're good at, and some might be good in the writing part, some might be good in audio, some people might be good in front of a camera or visual content, whatever, right? Creating that kind of content. So just to put things in perspective, Google earned approximately $41 billion last year, while Facebook earned $30 billion in 2019. All of these are related to digital marketing. So basically, how good are you at understanding the requirement of the customers and coming up with something, right, which would grab their attention and ultimately make them buy a particular product. That is what digital marketing is all about. And a note of caution here, that even though there are a lot of growth opportunities, roughly around 20 lakh jobs is what industry experts are looking at, right, in the field of digital marketing. But since it's an upcoming area and it is a booming kind of area, everyone wants to get into digital marketing. And so that makes it highly competitive in nature. Yeah. So now we move on to this area that is IT and IT-enabled services. I would begin with busting this particular myth that arts does not pay. Okay? When I started my presentation, I mentioned that a couple of years ago, if you told people that you're studying arts, people would kind of frown at you, right? And they would think that arts is not really an area which kind of pays, right? But this is not the picture anymore. Right? As a result of globalization, there are so many opportunities that have come up. And this is where English graduates stand a very good chance to work with top e-learning as well as IT companies as instructional designers, technical writers, content writers, market research analysts, or even blog writers. I'm extremely proud to mention that many of our ex-students who have done their masters in English from Fergusson College, they're working in various companies as instructional designers, technical writers. And a lot of them also get to go abroad on on-site assignments, places like the UK, US, Australia, and Europe. So that gives you a chance to travel. Now, let me just talk about the distinction between these two terms. Let me also mention that I will be focusing on instructional design and technical writing, two of the major areas in which there's a huge kind of demand. But before doing that, let me just mention what content writing is all about. So content writing is sort of, it can be seen as an early stage in e-learning or instructional design. It is a job where, as a content writer, you would be expected to look up material on the net and compile the relevant data for a particular topic, and then either write a short report or maybe put it in the form of a short report that would be easily accessible. That is what a content writer does. So even though it is I would say a job which is at the starting point, but it is not really all that challenging as compared to the other options that we would be talking about, and not really a very highly paying kind of option. But yes, that is the starting point. And a market analyst also does a similar kind of a job, collecting data on consumers, competitors, the marketplace, and putting all of this in the form of a report or a presentation. Now, blog writing is another area which is slightly different. It requires very good writing skills. You could write a blog about anything. It could be your hobbies, areas of interest. It could be cuisine, music, specific domains like career guidance, or you have blogs about maybe areas like which schools to go for, right, at the time of admissions. Or it could be blogs on the restaurants that you've visited, products. So blog writing is not restricted to any one particular area. And if you're a good blog writer, once your blog starts becoming very popular, companies start approaching you for displaying ads on your blogs, right? And some companies even pay you to write blogs, visits to restaurants, reviews on products, whatever. So your hobby of writing can actually become a career. But let me point out that blog writing is still in a very nascent stage. Now, where does the real action lie? The real action lies in e-learning or instructional design. So e-learning is a general kind of a term that we use to refer to any form of learning that uses electronic resources and would typically include computer or web-based training. It could include video broadcasts of lessons, podcasts of educational material. Now with the COVID scenario, right, a lot of colleges are making use of Google Meet or Microsoft Teams or Zoom to conduct their classes. So that is nothing but a form of e-learning, right? Instructional design is something which focuses more on computer or web-based training, where an instructional designer designs educational content for any training program. So instructional design is the practice of arranging media to help learners and to help teachers transfer knowledge in a very effective manner. Right? So you begin with kind of identifying the current state of the learner's understanding, defining the end goal of instruction. So a bit of educational psychology kind of comes into the picture. Okay? Now, e-learning or instructional design, it could include anything. It could be a training module on how to use a mobile phone. Or for example, Sai was helping me with the screen share options, right? So in a sense, that is also a form of instructional design, right? Or the help icon that you click on when you make use of Microsoft Word or PowerPoint, right? So that is also something which is a form of instructional design. To just put things in perspective, e-learning is a $200 billion industry worldwide, and out of which India accounts for hardly $2 or $3 billion. Right? So you can gauge the job opportunities which are waiting to tap. About technical writing, I would say is something which is all about providing documentation, right? That is needed for any product. Instruction manual, like I said, any manual that comes along with a product, right? And if you're confused, you refer to that particular instruction manual and try to figure out how to use that particular gadget. Right? So that is the job of the technical writer. So after the coder or the programmer has written a software program, he or she describes it in a very general format. So the job of the technical writer is to develop this instruction manual, which would make the program easy and accessible for the user. User-friendly, that is one key area. Right? So that's why it's necessary that you should be highly proficient in English, and you should have the ability to write in a very compact, in a very precise kind of a manner. Right? So many companies make use of MS Word. That is one of the most common things. So if you're going for a job interview or a test related to technical writing, they would expect you to be familiar with MS Word for starters. And I would use this analogy of the human brain. Just like we use barely 15 to 20% of the human brain, right? Similarly, most of us typically use only 15 to 20% of all the features that are available in MS Word. Right? So that is one area that you need to work on if you want to become a technical writer. And of course, then you have programs like RoboFrameMaker and other similar programs, but you don't really need to be scared. because once companies hire you, they train you on the job. And almost every IT company has a separate technical writing division. And there's one thing about this particular job, that a lot of companies do send their technical writers abroad on-site or offshore kind of assignments. And the salary is pretty lucrative. It is a highly paid job, but slight disadvantage that a lot of people find this job slightly boring or monotonous, because it's a fixed kind of a thing, right? Chicago manual of style, Microsoft manual of style. You just have to kind of internalize all these rules, regulations, and the conventions that are used, and then make the document in that particular form. Right? So if you're really keen on creativity, then you might find it slightly boring. Right? And there's this list of various places where you can do a course related to technical writing. TechnoWrites is a Pune-based company which offers a diploma in technical communication. Symbiosis Center for Distance Learning offers a diploma in technical writing. Even the Department of English, SPPU, offers technical writing as a elective kind of a subject. And Fergusson College also has a certificate program in collaboration with TechnoWrites. Right? So it's your choice, kind of, right? So if you're okay with a highly paid job, which is almost at par with software programmers, right? But if you're okay with the slight monotony, as some people find it, then this is a very good option that you can look at. There's one thing that I would like to mention here, that instructional design is a wider kind of a term, a wider discipline, of which technical writing is a small part. Right? So anybody who's trained as an ID or instructional designer will also be able to work as a technical writer. So that's why we'll be spending a lot of time on understanding the area of instructional design, or ID as it is referred to. So the definitions: a systematic approach to planning and producing effective instructional materials. Effective so that you reach out to your audience, to your students, and they should be able to understand it in a structured kind of way, beginning from simple, moving on to complex. So it is based on theoretical as well as practical research in the areas of cognition, educational psychology, and problem solving. So this is where I think students who have a background in education, those who have done their BA, also stand a very good chance. Right? So educational psychology is important because just like a teacher has to pay attention to whether the students are able to understand whatever you're saying. Right? In a face-to-face kind of a discussion, it's very easy for the teacher to judge that. You can check the feedback on the students' faces. But in an online kind of a format, it becomes slightly difficult. Right? So the material has to be designed and arranged in such a way that it should not create what is known as a cognitive overload. Right? Too many things on the screen can be very distracting, or too complex, right? Too slow, too fast. Right? So you have to get the right kind of mixture. And this is what instructional design is all about. Right? So to give you a simple example, many of you all would have done courses like MSCIT. Right? So the CD that you make use of, that is also an example of instructional design program. Byju's, a very good example. You have seen a lot of ads related to Byju's. So Byju's is a company set up by Baiju Ravindran, right? An engineer from Calicut. He started this company in 2011, and now As per recent valuations, it is a $6 billion company. And it is not the only company. You have similar companies like NIT, Educom, Merit Nation. And like I mentioned earlier, right, the overall worldwide, the market is roughly around $200 billion. And there's an acute shortage of good instructional designers. Right? That is where the job of an instructional design comes in. So now, why is this particular domain relevant? So you could have a better kind of a richer learning experience, where whatever queries that the students might have, to put things in perspective, or to make it very simple, if students have a lot of queries, and after some time the teacher kind of gets tired, but if it's an online kind of a device, right, and you have a list of FAQs, then all the student has to do is just click on the required kind of query, and you get the answer. Right? So there's no question of repetition, and whatever queries that you might have could be solved. So in that sense, you can also make your teaching material more specific to whatever the learning goal might be, and your objectives. And there will be better transparency by putting the students through tests. Right? You learn a particular topic, you click on the test that would be there, and you see your progression. If it comes to, say, language teaching kind of instructional design material, maybe there's some problem related to grammar, right? Particular tenses you make mistakes in. So towards the start of the program, probably if you in one given paragraph you commit, say, around 8 to 10 errors. Once you finish that particular module, and you check yourself once again, you realize that the number of errors that you are committing is far less. Right? Now, the biggest advantage of ID is that it can accommodate a large number of students. Right? Just to give one simple example, Symbiosis Center for Distance Learning has more than 1 lakh students worldwide. Right? And this was the data maybe a year ago. Probably the number might be far more. Right? It caters to learning on demand, anywhere, anytime. Right? And it's very flexible. You can work, you can study as per your time. You could be working in some company, and at the same time you could enroll for any such course, and you could even upgrade your knowledge related to various courses. Whatever upcoming kind of areas that come up, you could just do a course related to that. That is why instructional design is something which is very, very relevant, right? And if you take a look at some of the top employers in India, they have a huge demand for technical writers as well as instructional designers, right? And they have their separate divisions. And not just India, you have a lot of jobs that are available in various parts of the world. Right? Now, who can become a good instructional designer, right? Whom is this career most suited for? Right? So, language skills have to be good, LS, RW. Right? You have to pay keen attention to detail, analytical ability, right? Analyzing what the problem is. So you'll be given an essay on a particular topic, say, for example, viruses. Right? You have to understand it and then break it down into smaller parts. Right? And you have to kind of, for this, you have to put in extra effort, because you'll have different type of learners. Some of them are good at comprehension, some of them might be slow, right? So to cater to their requirement, you should be able to come with good material. And it follows, like a good teacher, you need to have that expertise of making complex ideas simple, and creativity kind of helps. And basic computer skills, of course, are very essential. So a lot of people shift jobs, right? They start as copywriters, copy editors, or journalists, and then move to instructional design, because this is a huge kind of a market. Right? So even teachers make the shift from their respective domain to ID. So there's this network called Technical Writers of India Network. They have around 19,000 members, and ID plus tech writers together are around 25,000 in India, but this number is growing day by day. And I can tell you this with a lot of authority, that since I'm the placement coordinator for my department, every couple of days we have mails from companies asking them to send us good students for instructional design opportunities. Okay? There's an acute shortage of instructional designers. Some additional skills, of course, a good academic record is essential. Good communication skills, interpersonal skills, because you'll be working with a team, remember. Right? Typically in an instructional design team, you have a lead manager, you have what is known as a SME, subject matter expert, you have to interact with them. You have a coder, someone who writes the coding. You have an animation artist, right? Animation expert, right? So you have to, and of course, someone who keeps tab of the budget that is provided. So you have to work with all of them. So that is where your team working skills come in. And you have to keep yourself abreast with the latest developments in your particular area if you want to become an ID. So now this is a brief overview of what exactly do instructional designers do. They work with SMEs, subject matter experts. So if I have to prepare a module on, say, mathematics, right? I obviously, as an instructional designer, cannot be an expert in that particular area. So someone who is an expert, an SME, I sit with that person. I identify what the needs of the students are. I develop some objectives, right? At the end of this course, what is it that you're going to learn? And you have to ensure that the material that I produce, the content, it matches these objectives. Okay? So if I want to teach, say, for example, integration or derivation, my content has to match these objectives. And at the end of that particular module, the student should be able to solve exercises related to that. Right? So at times you might have to revise it, you might have to reshape your content, right? You would have to structure it, and you would have to include some activities which would make it sound very interesting, right? The audiovisual part. Plus assessment also has to be done. You have to check whether the students have really understood whatever you have taught them. And how do you do that? Because it's an online mode, you cannot interact with the students directly. So you give them tests which they can kind of appear for, and you can also give them suggestions based on the mistake that they have committed, right? Certain areas where they need to improve. Right? So this is basically the job of instructional designers. Right? Now, having talked a lot about instructional design, a very logical question that you would come up with is that I'm a graduate, and is this field of instructional design kind of good for me? Right? So is it my cup of tea or not? So this is like a checklist, right? If you are thinking about a career in instructional design, you'll have to ask yourself, will I be okay working behind the scenes instead of working directly? Teachers work with students directly, but here you'll have to work behind the scenes, right, as an instructional designer. There are some positions where instructional design is also combined with student interaction, but largely it is working behind the scenes. You'll have to work with SMEs, right? Anybody who's an expert in a particular domain. You'll have to understand that particular topic from them. You'll have to create material, check with them whether it's proper or not, right? And you have to keep learning how to develop new skills. You have to learn how to use technology. It's an always learning kind of thing, right? At no point can you say that I've learned enough. You have to keep upgrading your skills all the time. And if it helps you, if you feel happy in helping others learn, right? And at the same time learning yourself, that is the continuous improvement part. So if all the answers to these questions, if you take and say yes, I love working behind the scenes. I'm okay working with experts in a particular domain. I'm okay with learning and adapting to technology, always learning, helping others learn, right? So then I would say that instructional design is one area which is kind of good for you. But let me tell you that it takes almost 6 months for a lot of freshers to kind of grasp the intricacies of instructional design. And just like software people, you have to keep updating your skills all the time. Okay? You have to buy books, refer to books. There are various portals like Udemy, Coursera, and many other portals where you can join courses and kind of upgrade your skills. Now, a very valid question that you would ask is that I'm a fresher. Do I have a chance? The answer is yes. And the reason is very simple. Freshers come into the area with an open kind of mindset, and they don't have any fixed or preconceived kind of notions in mind. They're okay with it's like a clean slate, right? Someone who's already worked in a particular domain, if you have to train that person, you would have to make that person unlearn a lot of things. But freshers don't have that kind of baggage. They have a better ability to spot problems in the process of training, right? Because like I said, people who have been working in that particular field, they're used to, habituated to working in a straight-jacketed kind of a manner. So they can't think beyond that. That is a constraint. But a fresher does not have any of these constraints. Once again, there are no barriers. Freshers have a high risk-taking capacity, right? And they're not kind of tied down by many of these long-held kind of assumptions. They're full of enthusiasm, a lot of zest, highly creative in nature, right? And this creativity kind of comes in very handy. And it goes without saying that freshers typically come with a very high kind of energy level, right? Which is very helpful. So they improve the group dynamics that lead to a better, happier, and a more energetic kind of a workplace. Yeah. So these are some of the places where the courses are available. There are two ways of doing that. The indirect way is on-the-job training. Remember that these courses have started in the last 5 to 10 years or so. Prior to that, these courses were simply not there. People would learn on the job, right? And they still do. A lot of people, a lot of companies still hire freshers and they train them on the job. But if you really want to do a course, you could opt for any of these courses. This is just a general kind of list. You could do your own research as well. The list of companies. SNDT is one of the few places which has a certificate level right up to PhD level course in instructional design for women. Symbiosis Center for Distance Learning offers a PGDID program. Technorites also offers a 10able wavelength in Delhi, 4C Learning in Bangalore, e-learning solutions in Hyderabad. These are some of the well-known kind of companies. And so this is the typical hierarchy. You begin as a content writer, move on to a trainee ID, then a senior ID, an assistant manager, and then finally a consultant. Consultant is kind of independent, right? Not on the company payrolls, but a highly paid kind of a job. Right? So even if you begin with a pay scale of say around 8 to 10,000, you very quickly in a year or two you move on to 50 to 20,000, and then as a senior ID 30 to 40,000, and then a manager 1 lakh and above. And for a consultant, like I said, it's a highly paid kind of a job. They get anything between 3 to 4 lakhs per month. Right? And I say this with a lot of authority. I have some of my ex-students working in Infosys as well as HSBC e-learning companies as consultants, drawing a very high pay package. I'm happy to say that some of my students earn more than what I do. Right? Nothing makes a teacher more happier than to see his or her students doing really well, right? So for a consultant, sky is the limit. Now, very quickly, the pros and the cons. Right? The flip side first. Many of these jobs are integrated to the US and the world economy. Right? So if there's a recession in the world economy, chances are that the projects might reduce. On the other hand, a lot of people argue that whenever there's a recession, there's more demand for these career options, because companies want to cut their costs and they hand over these jobs to instructional design companies. It's a very fierce kind of a competitive market. It is not a bed of roses. And if you have to survive the cutthroat competition, you have to be continuously on your toes, upgrading your skills. Because whenever there's a huge layoff, the ones who are not productive, who are not good enough, whose appraisals are not good, they're the first ones to be given the pink slip. Right? And private sector or the corporate sector jobs do not have this job security like a typical government job would do. And you don't really have post-retirement benefits, right? In India, we still have that bias and mental block where we look for typical government kind of jobs. Right? But the simple point is that there aren't enough government jobs for everybody. Right? So the advantages of these fields is that there are immense kind of opportunities where the salary is pretty decent. And like I said, you get to travel to various places. And there's a lot of job satisfaction, working from scratch and seeing a program develop, right? And that is really very satisfying, very similar to what a teacher does in a class. The work environment is very healthy and safe, especially for women, right? You have a lot of women employees in various IT and IT-enabled services, right? And increasingly, a lot of companies are offering a lot of good facilities to kind of ensure or to retain kind of talent. Right? So to conclude, I would say that these are some of the upcoming areas that are available for students of English literature or English in general. You should take up the challenge. You should go for it. You need to shed, you need to go beyond the conventional areas that are typically available. The mental block that is there, this is a new area, how can I get into it? Right? And can always try look for the tried and tested jobs. But like I said earlier, do you have enough number of government jobs for everybody? The answer is no. Right? I think that should clinch the deal. For those who are still not convinced, I leave you with my favorite lines of Kipling. If you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance, run. Yours is the earth and everything that is in it. And what is more, you will be a man, my son. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shardool Thakur. It was a very, very useful presentation that you have made, and you have given a rousing start to our webinar series. Thank you indeed. I now request the participants to proceed with their questions. There were quite a few who had keyed in their questions earlier. May I request you to repeat your questions through chat. Please do not put your audio on. Key in your questions on chat. Dr. Thakur, there were a couple of questions earlier. Just to start off this question and answer session, I will read out one of the questions that was asked. In fact, I think there were two questions. One of them was, is corporate trainers is like spoken English trainers? By Vinita Bhairi has asked this question. Are corporate training, is that like spoken English training?
Yeah, so I would say that the basic format is the same. The only thing is that since it's a corporate kind of a setup, the focus would be more on business English, right? And it could either be, like I said, LSRW. It could be related to the spoken part, or it could also be related to maybe the nuances of drafting emails, right? Drafting reports and many other things, right? It can be a general thing. It can also be a customized kind of a thing. It varies, but it includes both. I would say a slightly more advanced form of a regular spoken English training program. A typical spoken English program would ensure that you learn how to speak confidently. But a corporate training program would be slightly more specific in nature, and it would kind of ensure that the requirement of that particular organizations are met in a proper manner. I hope it answers the query.
There is one more question. This was asked by Aishwarya Acharya. What are the selection procedures for these jobs?
Yeah, so typically what they do is they give you writing assignments. If it is instructional design, it is technical writing, content writing. They give you assignments. Like I said, how well do you know MS Word, right? They would give you tests based on that, right? So they would expect you to be fully familiar with Microsoft Word, PowerPoint, Excel, right? And they would give you short assignments. So basically, they look for your writing skills initially. Then, of course, there are various rounds of interviews that take place. The technical round, which judges your knowledge related to a particular domain. It could be the HR round, right, where they want to see how committed you are to taking up that particular position. They check your team working skills, and this is how they typically go about it. So you can expect after clearing the written examination, you could expect another 2 to 3 rounds of interviews.
There are a few more questions that have come in the chat.
Yeah. So do you want me to kind of go through them and answer them, Professor Bhatt?
Yes, or else I can read it out to you if you prefer that.
Yeah, that would be easier.
Okay. So Sakshi Pawar wants to know what are the career prospects with a foreign language and a degree in English?
Right. So like I said, both in instructional design as well as in technical writing, a lot of companies work across languages, right? So you must be aware that Pune in particular has around 200 companies which are Indo-German collaborative in nature. Similarly, a lot of companies which are French in nature, right? So such companies, both for their BPOs as well as any of these instructional design kind of jobs, they prefer people with a background in that particular knowledge, that particular language. So if you have a degree in a particular foreign language as well as you're good in English, so you definitely are at advantage when it comes to these foreign companies.
Rutuja Kulkarni wants to know, Dr. Thakur, what is the scope of journalism in the upcoming years?
Yeah, so journalism, like I said, the market is huge, but at the same time, if you take a look at the number of enrollments, the number of graduates that are being churned out, be it mass media, journalism, or any of these BVOC kind of graduation level courses, there's a saturation, right? A lot of our students who are working in various journalism related jobs, they tell us that it is highly competitive in nature. It's cutthroat. It has reached such a saturation level that even as a fresher, you have to keep slogging for around 7 to 8 years. I know a lot of my friends who work in various newspapers, and after having put in around 8 to 10 years of on the field kind of job, they're still kind of doing field reporting. and because the market is extremely cutthroat. Right? So it is a good opportunity, but then be ready for extremely cutthroat competition and saturation that you see in journalism, all forms of journalism, be it print, electronic, or even the web portals. Yeah.
Yes, Dr. Thakur, Asmita Wag wants to know, what is the scope for BCom MA students? I think what she means is people who have done a BCom and then an MA.
Yeah, see, your graduation hardly kind of makes a difference. It is true that a lot of companies do prefer students with a background in English, but then if you have done an MA, right, then that's good enough. But what is more important is your language skills, right? Your ability, like I said, for technical writing, your ability to write in a grammatically accurate kind of a way, in a compact kind of a way, right? Brevity, right? It should be very, very compact. You have to cut out a lot of unnecessary kind of stuff. You have to make it very precise. So if you possess all of these skills, then a BCom or MA is as good as, say, a BA in English and a MA in English.
Two people who want to know how to become an accent trainer.
Yeah, so
I think Michelle and Ankita.
Yeah, so one is that a lot of accent trainers who have worked in the industry for some time, they do this training on weekends, right? They're already working with various companies, and they're free on Saturdays and Sundays, and they conduct training programs. There are some institutes which do conduct accent training kind of programs. I'm sorry, I think I missed out on sharing a list of these. If you, I've given my email towards the beginning of the presentation. If you just write to me, I could share a list of these institutes with you.
Right.
I'll type out my email ID here for the convenience of everybody. Yeah.
There's a question from, there's a question from Ayush Sain asking, what are the requirements for becoming a lexicographer?
I'm sorry, I'm not really very familiar with that domain, so it would not be proper.
Okay, Ayush Sain, that is a very, very unique kind of a specialist job. I guess you will need to kind of look up on the net for that. That's not really a very popular profession. Okay, Sukanya Garg would like to know how a fresh postgraduate may start working as a corporate soft skill trainer.
Yeah, so typically, I mean, you'd be interested in checking out the career options, either enrolling with a portal, any of the portals like Naukri.com, Monster, whatever, right? Or checking out the career options of various websites of companies, or it could be through word of mouth, right? You're getting in touch with the HR division of a particular company, and they would be able to tell you about the openings related to corporate training. So for corporate training, typically people who have worked in that domain for a couple of years later start working kind of freelance. Right?
Lalita Pandey has a question. Can these be done as part-time? If one is working already, is it possible to do some of these jobs part-time?
So, like I said, after you have worked in the domain for some time, right? Both instructional design or technical writing for a couple of years, and you're completely familiar, right? Then it's possible to take up part-time as well as freelance kind of jobs. And you have various sites where you can actually bid for certain programs, right? For developing a particular module. You have to give a quotation saying that this is I'll do this particular module in this amount, and you have to give a small sample of your ability to kind of develop a module, right? And then if your bidding is the lowest, you might get a chance, right? Or like I said, if you are in touch with HR managers of a particular company, they do outsource this work to freelancers also. But as a rule, generally companies prefer having people on their payrolls, either in a full-time capacity or in a part-time. Yeah.
I think, well, there is one more question. It is, how can one improve accent?
Yeah, so like I said, it's a spectrum. If you think of since there's a question that has been asked here by Verinder Kaur, that linguistic competence. So if one is really proficient in a particular language, the ability to speak non-stop without having to think about a particular thing, right? It follows that you need to have a reasonably good vocabulary, right? You should be familiar with various sentence patterns, right? And you should be able to come up with words, sentences in order to say whatever you have in mind, right? So now, in order to kind of improve your accent, one of the common things that is suggested, there are a lot of open source kind of programs available on the net where you can actually listen to your accent and compare it with received pronunciation, and you can kind of improve them. A lot of institutes offer they have language laboratories where you have software programs where you can check your accent, you can improve them. You can watch Hollywood movies, opera shows, listen to news, right? And you can check up dictionary apps where to check whether your pronunciation is proper or not, right? So in this way, I think this is one of the simplest ways in which one can improve one's accent.
I think we have taken quite a few questions, and you have answered them perfectly, Dr. Shardool Thakur. I once again thank you for your presentation as well as this active interaction with our participants. We have had participation from a very wide spectrum of people, not only our students but also people from outside. I would like to make a brief announcement regarding the upcoming webinars. Tomorrow we will have a webinar session by Dr. Madhuri Gokhale on preparing for NET and SET examinations, among other things. We will also have two special creative writing workshops, one on poetry and one on fiction. I see that among the participants today, some have asked about how to become an author or how to go about publishing, etc. Some people have asked these questions. I haven't forwarded those questions, or I haven't read out those questions simply because the creative writing sessions perhaps will address those questions. So do come back for the webinar sessions tomorrow and on 17th and 18th when we have the creative writing workshops. And somebody has asked about being able to watch Dr. Thakur's session again. I might add here that keep a watch on the Ahmednagar College YouTube channel. We will be uploading Dr. Thakur's video shortly, and you will be able to see it once again. The link will be Ahmednagar College. If you go to YouTube and search for Ahmednagar College, very soon we will be uploading Dr. Thakur's video. With this, I once again thank our speaker today, Dr. Shardool Thakur, for his excellent information. We all talk a lot about English language and literature, but I think ultimately, as one of the participant pointed out here, what matters most is jobs, that these teaching these courses without pointing to jobs is of no use. I can't remember the name of the person who asked that. I think it's Rao Saheb Borase, who had asked about, if these courses don't lead to jobs, then what is the point? He's right. And it is precisely here that Dr. Thakur's presentation has been very, very more than useful. They have been very valuable. In fact, Dr. Thakur has educated me as well in carrying forward this with my students who are not present here today. So thank you very much, Dr. Thakur. I hope to have you with us again in the future. I also want to thank all the participants who joined us for this webinar, and I hope to see you all once again in the next sessions of the webinar series. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Bye-bye. Sai, you can discontinue.